My grandson left me at the airport.
He looked me right in the eye, said he was too busy, and walked away. And a stranger, someone I'd never seen before, approached me with a look that made my stomach twist. I'm glad you're here to listen, because I've held this story close to my chest for too long. I need someone to hear it all the way through, without interrupting, without brushing it off as just family things.
So let me tell you how it began.
It was a Tuesday morning, early enough that the airport lights still had that bluish tint that makes everyone look tired. I'd flown across the country to visit my grandson, Liam. 21 years old, full of ambition, always talking about his projects and deadlines and how life was rushing ahead of him faster than he could keep up. I hadn't seen him in almost 2 years, ever since he left for college and then stayed on the West Coast after graduation. He'd invited me, or so I believed, to spend a week with him. We'd planned it during a phone call where he sounded almost excited, his voice warm, telling me he missed my cooking and my stories and that he wanted to make memories before life got too busy.
Those were his exact words. So I booked the ticket.
I packed the small rolling suitcase I'd had since my late husband bought it for me on our 30th anniversary. And I boarded the flight with my heart light, thinking maybe Liam finally wanted to reconnect. Maybe all the distance I'd been feeling was just my imagination. When the plane landed and I made my way through the terminal, I kept picturing him waiting with a smile, maybe holding a little sign like he used to as a joke when he was younger. I imagined hugging him, smelling that familiar mix of detergent and the cologne he always wore too much of. Instead, I found him standing near the exit, tapping at his phone so quickly his fingers blurred. He barely looked up when I waved. His hug was half-hearted, like he was embracing a coat instead of a person. And before I could even ask about his plans for the week, he murmured that he had just one thing he needed to deal with first. I remember blinking at him, confused. What kind of thing?
I asked.
Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you?
He didn't answer.
He just grabbed my suitcase handle and started walking so fast that I had to shuffle after him. I kept waiting for him to slow down, to notice how out of breath I was, to soften the sharp edge of his movements the way he had when he was a boy.
But he didn't.
When we reached the curb outside the terminal, he pulled my suitcase to a stop and finally looked at me properly.
His expression wasn't angry. It wasn't sad.
It was something colder, something detached, as if I were a task he'd forgotten to cross off his list. "Grandma," he said, "I'm really slammed today. Work stuff. Deadlines. You know." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first.
I wasn't prepared for this.
I'd imagined a whole week together, museums, little diners, late-night conversations the way we used to have.
I imagined him wanting me there. I swallowed and tried again. "Well, that's all right. I can wait at your place. You can work. I'll read."
"I'm no trouble." He shook his head quickly, too quickly. "Actually, something came up."
"I can't take you back with me right now. You'll need to stay here for a bit."
"I'll come get you later."
I stared at him. "Stay here?
"At the airport."
He looked away.
"It won't be long," he said, but even as he spoke, he was backing up, glancing at his phone again like it was more important than the grandmother who'd crossed the country for him. A small voice inside me whispered the truth, that he wasn't coming back soon. That maybe he hadn't planned for this visit at all. That maybe everything he'd told me on the phone had been said out of obligation, not love. But I pushed the voice away. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe that the boy I'd raised after his parents died, the boy who used to cling to my leg when he was scared, could look at me like I was a burden. He started walking off, lifting a hand as if that counted as a goodbye. "I'll text you," he called over his shoulder.
And that was it.
I was left standing at the curb with my suitcase and a knot in my stomach so tight I could barely breathe. People rushed past me, families, business travelers, couples arguing over taxes. No one noticed that I was frozen in place, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I forced myself to move, to step back inside the sliding doors before the chill sank too deep into my skin. I found a chair near the baggage claim, sat down, and clutched my purse like it was the only thing anchoring me.
Minutes passed. Then more minutes. 20, 30, 40.
No message from Liam. I kept checking my phone, pressing the side button just to watch the screen light up, as if the act alone would make a notification appear.
But it stayed blank.
That's when the stranger approached me. At first, I didn't notice him. I was too focused on the sliding doors, hoping Liam would suddenly burst through them, apologizing, telling me he'd fixed whatever thing he needed to handle. But then I heard footsteps slow beside me, hesitant, like the person wasn't sure if they were allowed to speak.
"Excuse me," a voice said.
I looked up. He was maybe in his late 40s, with tired eyes and a travel pillow hanging around his neck. He carried a backpack that looked too heavy for just a short trip. There was a softness to him, a kind of gentle caution, like he didn't want to startle me.
"I'm sorry," he said, "but are you okay?"
You've been sitting here a while.
I felt a flush rise in my cheeks.
Had it been that obvious?
Had I looked abandoned? Lost? Pathetic?
I'm fine,
I lied quickly. His eyes flicked to my suitcase.
Are you waiting for someone?
I hesitated. I didn't want to say it. Saying it out loud would make it real.
But I didn't have time to decide, because he did something unexpected. He sat down in the empty chair next to mine, not too close, but close enough that I felt the warmth of another human presence. Well, he said gently, if you need help or company, I'm here for the next hour before my layover ends. It was then that I noticed something else, something subtle, something surprising.
He wasn't just being polite.
He looked worried.
Truly worried.
As if he saw something in me that reminded him of someone he loved. And that worried look stirred something in my chest, something fragile. I didn't know it then, but this stranger would unravel everything I thought I knew about my grandson, about the visit, about why I was really left alone at that airport.
Because he hadn't just been watching me. He'd been watching Liam. And he'd seen something I hadn't.
But that comes later. For now, all I knew was this: a stranger had noticed my pain before my own grandson did. And that realization cracked something inside me that I didn't yet have words for. I took a breath, bracing myself for whatever truth was about to unfold. Before everything fell apart, before the airport, before the stranger, before the moment I finally understood just how far Liam had drifted from me, life had felt steady. Not perfect, of course.
Not exciting.
But steady, the kind of steadiness that comes from decades of routines, from knowing the shape of your days and the quiet corners of your home. I live alone in a small house on the east side of town, the same house my husband, Robert, and I bought when Liam was just a toddler. After the accident that took his parents, Liam came to live with us, filling the rooms with noise and toys and questions he was too young to ask but asked anyway.
Those years were chaotic and painful, but they were also full of purpose.
Every morning I woke up knowing I had someone who needed me, someone whose world depended on mine being intact. And even after Robert passed, even after Liam grew older and more independent, there was still a trace of that purpose left inside me.
I cooked meals even when it was just me eating them.
I kept the guest room made up, sheets washed and tucked, just in case Liam surprised me with a visit. Sometimes, late at night, I'd open the door and just stand there, imagining the mess he'd make within minutes, imagining him sitting on the bed with his laptop, asking for advice he'd pretend not to need.
I held onto those images more than I should have. Liam wasn't a bad person.
I never saw him as ungrateful or cruel. He was busy, always busy, and I tried to be understanding.
That's what you do when you love someone.
You stretch yourself until you feel thin, and then you stretch a little more. You make excuses for their silence, their missed calls, their rushed conversations that end mid-sentence because they have to run. You tell yourself it's normal. It's just youth, ambition, stress. You don't let yourself think that maybe you've been moved to the edges of their life. Because edges fray, and once you slip off, it's hard to find your way back. Still, despite the distance, I'd believe the trip would be good for us.
A reset.
A chance to remember that we were family, not strangers passing through each other's schedules. But before I even boarded the plane, there had been warning signs, small things, quick flashes of something off-kilter. When I first called to ask if the week still worked for him, he hesitated a moment too long before answering. Just long enough for me to sense he was flipping through mental excuses, trying to find one that wouldn't hurt my feelings. Eventually he said, "Yeah, of course, Grandma. Can't wait."
But his voice didn't have that spark he used to get when we made plans. It was flatter, polite, but hollow. Then there was the way he avoided details.
If I asked what restaurants he wanted to show me, he'd say, "We'll figure it out." If I asked about the schedule, he'd say, "We'll play it by ear." If I mentioned something we used to do together, like our tradition of trying the most ridiculous dessert on any menu, he'd chuckle, but it sounded forced.
Still, I ignored it. I told myself he was tired. Work was hard. Life was overwhelming.
I filled in the gaps with hope because hope was easier than accepting the truth. And the truth, as the stranger would later reveal, was much more complicated. My days leading up to the flight were spent preparing little things I thought would make him happy. I crocheted a scarf in his favorite color, remembering the way he used to wrap himself in blankets on the couch like a cocoon. I baked cookies he used to devour in handfuls. I printed out old photos to show him, pictures from when he'd first learned to ride a bike, from his school plays, from the summer he insisted on planting tomatoes even though he hated tomatoes. Packing those things into my suitcase felt like packing pieces of my heart. Each item carried a memory, a moment I thought he'd smile at, maybe even hug me for. But when I arrived at the airport that morning, and he offered me nothing more than a distracted hug and that quick, tight-lipped expression, something inside me dimmed a little. Just a flicker. A small acknowledgement that maybe I'd misread everything. That maybe I was holding on to a version of him that no longer existed. Still, I walked beside him, trying to match his pace, pretending not to notice how he kept checking his phone, how his feet angled slightly away from me even when we stood still, like his body was always ready to leave.
I told myself it was nerves. Stress. A bad morning.
Anything except indifference.
We passed a little cafe with pastries behind glass.
I pointed at one, saying, "Remember when we used to split chocolate croissants after school? You'd always steal the bigger half." I laughed, hoping he would laugh too. But he only glanced, nodded once, and said, "Yeah, that was forever ago." Forever. The way he said it hurt more than he knew. But the real warning sign, the one that stayed with me, was the way he looked at me when I asked if he'd help me with my suitcase.
Just a simple request. Something he'd always done without thinking. He hesitated. Just a moment.
Barely noticeable. But his eyes flicked around first, as if checking who might see him. As if helping me would inconvenience him, or embarrass him, or, and this thought I tried hard to shut out, slow him down. He took the handle anyway, but the hesitation lingered in my mind. It planted itself like a seed, quiet and patient, waiting to grow.
Still, I didn't let myself dwell on it.
I was too busy trying to make light conversation, trying to fill the silence he kept creating. I asked about his work, about his apartment, about his friends. He responded in clipped sentences, always with that same half-distracted tone. Thinking back now, I realize I did most of the talking. I was carrying both ends of a conversation, trying to bridge a gap that he wasn't trying to cross. And yet, even with all those signs, even with the tightness in my chest building with every step,
I didn't expect him to leave me. Not like that.
Not standing alone at the curb with my suitcase and my hope crumbling at my feet. But people don't turn cold all at once. It happens in small moments, small dismissals, small hesitations that accumulate until suddenly you realize you've been shut out completely.
That thought hadn't fully formed yet, though.
Not when I sat in that airport chair, checking my phone for messages that wouldn't come.
Not when the stranger first approached me with concern in his eyes.
Back then, I still believed Liam loved me. I still believed he'd return with an apology, maybe with a flustered explanation about a work emergency. Back then, I still believed the week could be saved.
But the stranger knew something I didn't.
He'd seen the truth written in a moment I'd missed, one small, devastating moment. And as he took a slow breath beside me, preparing to speak, I felt the first real chill twist through my ribs.
Something was wrong. Very wrong.
And I was finally beginning to sense just how deeply that wrongness ran. The stranger didn't speak right away. He sat carefully, the way people do when they're afraid of intruding. His hands rested loosely on his backpack straps, and his eyes kept flicking toward the entrance where Liam had disappeared.
That alone made my chest tighten. Why would he be watching Liam?
"Are you sure you're all right?" he asked again, softer this time, almost tentative.
I forced a small smile and nodded. Just waiting for my grandson.
Had something come up? The words felt heavy, like I'd swallowed stones. Saying them out loud made the situation more real, and the fragility of my voice probably gave me away even more than my expression. He hesitated, then said, "I saw him talking to you. I wasn't eavesdropping, but I noticed he left in a hurry."
I blinked. "You saw that?" He nodded.
He looked stressed. There was a gentleness in his tone, not judgmental, but concerned in a way that surprised me. Most travelers at airports never look beyond their own chaos. But this man, who would later tell me his name was Matthew, had noticed something I hadn't even realized was visible to others, the quiet desperation I was trying so hard to hide.
I straightened in my chair, smoothing my skirt. "He's just busy," I said.
"He'll be back soon." Matthew didn't contradict me. He just nodded slowly, his brow furrowing in a way that suggested he didn't believe a word of it, but didn't want to hurt me by saying so.
I appreciated that. More than he knew.
For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. He just sat beside me, offering silent company while travelers rolled by with their noisy suitcases and hurried footsteps. Every time the sliding doors opened, I glanced up, searching for Liam's silhouette. But each time, it was someone else. Families reuniting, friends embracing, strangers rushing to their gates.
Not Liam.
The longer I waited, the heavier the air felt in my lungs. Finally, Matthew cleared his throat. Do you mind if I ask, was he supposed to pick you up today? To take you home? Something in the careful way he asked told me this was more than casual curiosity. Yes, I said. I flew across the country to visit him. We planned this weeks ago. Matthew exhaled, long and slow, and I could see the moment he decided something inside himself. A kind of internal bracing. What's wrong? I asked. He shifted, turning slightly toward me.
I don't want to upset you. Truly.
But when he left, his expression didn't look like someone rushing back to take care of something small.
I swallowed hard.
What did it look like? He paused, as if searching for the most gentle version of the truth. It looked like someone who didn't expect to come back.
My breath caught. A cold spike slid down my back. That's not possible, I said quickly. He told me he'd return. He promised he'd come get me.
He said.
Matthew raised a hand softly.
Not to shush me, but to steady the tremble in my voice. I might be wrong, he said. It's just,
I've had to leave someone behind before. Someone who trusted me.
I recognized the look. There was something in his eyes then, a shadow of pain, that made me stop arguing. This wasn't a man trying to be dramatic. He was a man speaking from experience. Still, the instinct to defend Liam surged through me. He's a good boy, I murmured, as if saying it aloud would make it true in that moment. He's just overwhelmed. Matthew nodded, but that crease remained between his brows.
My phone buzzed. My heart leapt, so fast I nearly fumbled the device.
I unlocked it immediately, breath held tight.
It wasn't Liam. Just an airline survey asking about my flight.
The disappointment hit harder than it should have. A small sting, but it sank deep. Matthew must have noticed the way my shoulders slumped. He shifted again, lowering his voice. May I ask you something?
I nodded without looking up. Has he been distant recently?
Before today, I mean.
The question struck harder than I expected.
Images flashed in my mind. Missed holidays, short phone calls, messages left on read for days. Times when I made excuses for him, even when the excuses hurt me. Yes, I finally whispered. But I thought this trip was his way of trying again. Matthew looked at me with such genuine sympathy that it nearly made me cry right there in that crowded baggage claim area. I'm sorry, he said. Really?
And I believed he meant it. I stared down at my hands. The skin there was thinner now, mapped with the delicate lines of age.
I wondered if Liam had seen those hands and been reminded of his childhood, of the times I'd held his during fevers and scraped knees.
Or maybe he hadn't really looked at all.
What exactly did you see? I asked, needing clarity, even if it hurt. Matthew lifted his eyes, choosing each word carefully. When he walked away, he didn't look back. Not even once. A small, bitter laugh escaped me. Well, that's not unusual for young people.
That's not what I mean, he said gently. He looked relieved.
Like he'd just crossed something off his list. Relieved.
Crossed off.
The words stung, but they fit too easily. Something inside me gave a quiet, painful shift. I hadn't wanted to see the truth. I'd clung to the idea of Liam as the boy I'd raised. The boy who cried on my shoulder when he lost his first pet, who left sticky jam fingerprints on my walls, who insisted that I tuck him in with a story every night.
But people grow. People change. People leave. Still, I shook my head. He said he'd text me. Matthew didn't respond. His silence said enough.
And then something happened that nudged the first real doubt into place, small, subtle, but undeniable. A young woman walking past us paused, looked at me, then at Matthew. Her expression was sympathetic in that way people get when they witness something uncomfortable.
Are you all right? She asked me gently. It should have been a simple question. Harmless. Kind.
But it felt like something was collapsing inward. Because it meant that strangers, too now, could see what I had been trying to deny.
That I'd been left. That I looked abandoned. That Liam wasn't coming back soon.
I nodded to the woman, though the lie felt weaker now. She gave me a soft, apologetic smile and continued on.
Matthew's voice broke the silence between us. If you'd like, I can stay until I have to board.
I don't want to leave you alone while you're waiting. It was the gentlest trigger imaginable, but it cracked something wide open. Because the truth was there now, sitting heavy in my chest.
I was alone. And no text. No call. No footsteps approaching from the sliding doors would change that. Still, I clung to hope. Desperately.
He'll come back, I whispered. But even as I said it, the words trembled. And the tremble was the first real crack in the story I'd been telling myself.
A story that was about to unravel fast.
Because the inciting incident wasn't Liam leaving me. It was the moment I finally realized he might not be the boy I remembered at all. Matthew sat beside me while the minutes stretched into something heavier, thick, uncomfortable, almost suffocating. I kept watching the sliding doors as if I could will Liam to reappear. As if hope alone could drag him back through the doorway, smiling sheepishly, apologizing for being inattentive. But the longer I stared, the more obvious it became. He wasn't coming.
Not soon. Maybe not at all.
Matthew seemed to sense the shift inside me, the slow collapsing of the story I'd clung to. He didn't push me, didn't lecture, didn't try to convince me of anything. He just sat close enough that I could feel that I wasn't entirely alone, even while I tried to hide the sting behind calm breaths. After a while, he said quietly, "If you don't mind me asking, what were your plans with him this week?" The question was gentle, but answering felt like tearing open something raw. "We were going to spend time together," I said. "Cook meals, visit a museum he likes, maybe walk by the beach."
Simple things. I thought he wanted that. Matthew nodded slowly.
"That sounds really nice."
But he didn't sound convinced it would happen. Not anymore.
Not after what he'd seen. A dull ache settled under my ribs. I folded my hands in my lap, squeezing them together to keep them from shaking. "He invited me," I said, as if reminding myself. "He told me he missed me."
Matthew inhaled carefully.
Sometimes people say things they mean in the moment, but life pulls them different directions.
I shook my head. No.
This felt real. I needed it to be real. For a moment, the airport noise faded into a dull hum behind the thudding pulse in my ears. I found myself wondering, truly wondering, for the first time, why had he left so quickly? Why had he looked like he couldn't get away fast enough?
Why hadn't he even texted? "Do you think he'll come back?"
I asked quietly, though I wasn't sure if I was asking Matthew or pleading with the universe. Matthew didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees.
"I'm not him," he said.
"But
I think you deserve someone who shows up for you." That hurt.
Not because it wasn't true, but because it felt too true.
I swallowed hard. He's not a bad person.
"Most people aren't," Matthew said. "But that doesn't mean they don't hurt the ones who love them." The words echoed something I'd been trying not to feel. Something that had been growing for months, no, years. A sense that I was slipping out of Liam's life like a bookmark falling from a story he no longer cared to finish.
Still, I wasn't ready to give in to that thought. I checked my phone again. Still nothing. Matthew watched me gently.
"Is it all right if I ask you something a little personal?"
I nodded, though fear prickled at the edges of my chest. "How has he been with you the past year?"
Honest answer.
The past year. The truth unfolded in my mind like a series of snapshots.
The birthday call that lasted 2 minutes because he had a meeting starting. The missed Christmas visit because flights were too expensive. The message he forgot to reply to for nearly a week, only to say sorry, crazy busy.
Love you. The love you had been typed with no punctuation. It had felt like a footnote. Like something he added out of obligation. My throat tightened.
He's been distracted.
Matthew didn't comment.
He just waited, letting me speak at my own pace.
And distant, I added.
I kept thinking it was just growing pains.
You know how young people are when they start their lives.
But lately, I hesitated. Lately he talks to me like he's talking to an obligation. Like I'm something he's supposed to check on, not someone he wants to talk to. Matthew nodded in understanding, but his eyes showed a sadness that cut deeper than sympathy. Can I tell you something I noticed when he walked away earlier? He asked.
I felt my breath hitch.
Yes. Matthew took a moment, choosing his words with care. The way he glanced around before walking off, it wasn't just stress.
It was avoidance. Like he didn't want to be seen with you. A cold numbness spread through my chest.
That can't be right, I whispered. He's never been ashamed of me.
Matthew softened his tone. I'm sure he loves you. I'm sure he cares.
But love gets twisted sometimes. People get wrapped up in their image, their priorities. They forget the people who built them.
Built them. Yes.
I had built Liam's world when his first one collapsed. And now I was sitting here in an airport chair, slowly realizing he might have stepped out of that world entirely. Matthew's next words came gently.
I think he planned to drop you off. Or at least, he knew he couldn't take you with him today.
That wasn't spontaneous.
I stared at him. Planned?
But why would he?
And then something cracked inside my memory. Something I'd ignored.
A detail so small, but now it pulsed with clarity. When I'd called Liam 2 days before the trip, asking if he wanted me to bring anything from home, he'd hesitated, then said, Actually, are you sure the flight is this week? I thought it was next month. Next month? I'd brushed it off, thinking he'd mixed up the dates because of stress.
But now?
Now I realized it hadn't sounded like confusion.
It had sounded like surprise.
And reluctance. My breath came shallow and uneven. He didn't want me to come, I whispered. He didn't plan for me to come at all. Matthew didn't confirm it.
He didn't need to.
The truth was widening inside me, taking shape. Maybe he'd said yes on the phone weeks ago because it felt easier than saying no. Maybe he hadn't believed I'd actually booked the ticket. Maybe he hoped I'd forget.
Or cancel.
And when I arrived,
he panicked. Or felt annoyed.
Or, God help me, perhaps he felt trapped.
And leaving me at the airport was the path of least resistance.
The realization sat heavy, like a stone pressing into my chest until every breath felt raw. I leaned back, eyes burning.
Why would he do that?
After everything, after raising him, after losing his parents, why would he leave me like that? Matthew placed one hand on the back of the chair, not touching me, but close, steady. People run from the people who remind them of their past.
Especially painful pasts. It doesn't make it right. But it happens.
The words made tears prick the corners of my eyes.
Painful past.
Yes, Liam had won. But I had been the one who held him through it, not the one who caused it.
A tremor went through my voice. I thought I was his safe place.
Maybe you were, Matthew said softly. But sometimes, people forget where they came from when they are trying too hard to become someone new. I looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the truth stretching across his expression. This wasn't just my story.
It was his too.
Somewhere in his past, he'd lived some version of this pain.
Another minute passed in silence.
Then Matthew's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, grimaced.
My layover ends soon.
But I'm not leaving until you're okay.
I gave a humorless laugh.
I don't think I'll be okay for a while.
Matthew nodded solemnly.
Then I'll stay for a while.
It was such a simple sentence. But it broke something and mended something at the same time.
And it set the stage for what came next. Because Matthew wasn't just a concerned stranger.
He was about to show me something.
Something that would confirm my worst fear.
That Liam hadn't just left me. He had been planning to abandon me long before I boarded that plane.
Matthew didn't speak for a few seconds after telling me he'd stay. He let the air settle, as if he understood that my heart needed a moment to adjust, to soften around the truth instead of fighting it. He was a stranger, yes, but he carried himself like someone who'd learned, through pain or empathy or both, when to talk and when to simply be there. I focused on my breathing, slow and steady, counting the inhales the way I used to do during long nights when Liam was a grieving child who couldn't sleep. Back then, I was the one soothing him. Now, somehow, I was the one who felt small and lost.
And then Matthew shifted forward.
There's something else, he said quietly.
My stomach tightened.
What do you mean?
He nodded toward the sliding doors.
I didn't just see him walk away.
I heard something.
That made my pulse stumble. He said something. Matthew looked reluctant to continue, but he also looked like a man who believed the truth, even a painful one, was better than being left in the dark.
He was on the phone as he walked out, Matthew said.
I only caught a few words, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't planning to come back soon.
A cold wave swept through me.
What did he say? Matthew took a breath. It sounded like he said, "Yeah, I dropped her off."
No, it's fine. She'll figure something out.
I felt the world tilt slightly, as if the chair I sat on had become unstable. She'll figure something out.
As if I were, what? A chore?
A problem he'd managed to push aside? My hands trembled, and I gripped my purse tightly to hide it. He couldn't have meant me. Maybe he was talking about someone else.
Matthew didn't argue, but the way his eyebrows pulled inward told me he doubted it.
Another truth pressed forward, quieter, but sharper.
Liam hadn't called or texted.
Not once. Not even a quick, running late.
That wasn't forgetfulness. That was avoidance. I felt the shock begin to shift inside me.
The raw ache started turning into something colder, clarity.
A realization settling like frost.
Matthew watched me, waiting. What am I supposed to do?
I whispered.
First, he said, with gentle firmness, we get you somewhere safe and comfortable.
Not here.
Not waiting for someone who may not show up today.
The ache inside me twisted. Not show up today. Or tomorrow. Or at all. I blinked away the burn in my eyes.
I don't want to leave in case he comes back.
Matthew nodded slowly. That makes sense emotionally.
But practically, sitting in this chair all day won't make him come.
He wasn't patronizing me. He wasn't pushing.
He was guiding, quietly, calmly. I exhaled shakily. What would you do? If you were me? Matthew hesitated, then answered honestly. If I were you, I'd take control of the situation. I'd stop waiting for someone who's already shown he isn't coming, not today, at least. You deserve to be somewhere warm, with food, rest, and clarity. And then you can decide how to address him. Those words, take control of the situation, landed deeper than I expected. Because for hours, I had been passive.
Waiting. Hoping.
Clinging to a story that was dissolving in front of me.
But something had to change.
I booked a hotel near here for my layover last night, Matthew said.
It's walking distance. If you're comfortable, I can walk you there. You can sit in the lobby or cafe until you decide what you want to do.
I won't leave until you're settled. The offer was kind, almost too kind, and part of me resisted it out of pride. But another part, the tired, hurt, quietly breaking part, knew I needed to make a choice.
And staying in that chair wasn't a choice at all. It was surrender.
Still, fear curled in my chest. I don't want to be a burden. You're not, Matthew said firmly. You're a person who deserves help. Everyone does at some point. His words were so steady, so certain, that I felt something inside me release, just a little.
But before I agreed to anything, I needed one thing. Control. Even a small piece of it. I pulled out my phone.
Matthew watched gently. You going to message him?
No, I said.
I'm calling. For the first time since I'd landed, I wasn't calling from a place of desperation.
I wasn't hoping to beg him back.
I was calling for clarity, for truth. I tapped Liam's name and lifted the phone to my ear.
1 ring. 2 rings. 3.
My breath hitched with each one.
4. 5. Then his voicemail.
His recorded voice, cheerful, youthful, full of a warmth I hadn't heard from him in ages, hit me like a punch. Hey, you've reached Liam. Leave a message. I'll get back to you. The beep felt like a door slamming in my face.
I hung up without leaving a message. Matthew waited.
Nothing. Voicemail, I said. My voice sounded far away, unfamiliar. Do you want to try again?
I shook my head. No, not now.
Because now, for the first time, I didn't want to hear his excuses. I wanted space, to think, to breathe, to feel everything fully without collapsing under it. Matthew gave a small nod, then stood. Let's get you somewhere comfortable. Will you let me do that much? I hesitated only a moment. Then I stood too. Because I realized something important, something I'd forgotten about myself over the years.
I had survived harder things.
Worse days.
Deeper losses. I was not fragile. I was not helpless. And I would not let today break me.
As we started toward the sliding doors, the opposite direction from where I'd been staring for over an hour, I felt a subtle shift inside me.
The pain was still there. Sharp. Real.
Unavoidable. But woven through it was something new, resolve. A quiet, deliberate, cold kind of resolve. Because once I found a place to sit, to breathe, to steady myself, I would decide what came next.
And it wouldn't be passive. It wouldn't be me waiting to be chosen.
Liam had taken comfort in assuming I'd always be there, waiting. But waiting was over. The moment my feet left the airport floor behind me, I knew everything from here on would be different. And when I finally faced my grandson again, it wouldn't be as the grandmother he could abandon at a curb.
It would be as the woman he underestimated.
The hotel lobby was quiet, soft lighting, low voices, the gentle hum of air conditioning. Matthew led me to a small seating area near the windows, then gave me a moment to settle.
He didn't hover, didn't fuss.
He simply offered presence, not pressure. And for the first time since landing, I felt my breathing start to regulate. I sat there, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea he'd brought over, the steam drifting up like a quiet invitation to calm down.
But calm wasn't what came next.
No, what came next was fire. Because as I sat there, staring at that untouched tea, my phone vibrated. A message.
From Liam. Finally.
My stomach clenched, and I opened it immediately.
Hey, Grandma. Something came up. Super busy. Can you get an Uber to my place? Keys under the mat. Sorry. No warmth. No apology beyond a single cheap word. No acknowledgement of the hours I sat waiting. I read it again. Then again.
And with each read, something inside me hardened. The ache turned into something sharper. Clarity, then certainty. But woven through it was something new. Resolve. A quiet, deliberate, cold kind of resolve. Because once I found a place to sit, to breathe, to steady myself, I would decide what came next.
And it wouldn't be passive. It wouldn't be me waiting to be chosen.
Liam had taken comfort in assuming I'd always be there, waiting. But waiting was over. The moment my feet left the airport floor behind me, I knew everything from here on would be different. And when I finally faced my grandson again, it wouldn't be as the grandmother he could abandon at a curb.
It would be as the woman he underestimated.
The hotel lobby was quiet, soft lighting, low voices, the gentle hum of air conditioning. Matthew led me to a small seating area near the windows, then gave me a moment to settle. He didn't hover, didn't fuss. He simply offered presence, not pressure. And for the first time since landing, I felt my breathing start to regulate. I sat there, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea he'd brought over, the steam drifting up like a quiet invitation to calm down.
But calm wasn't what came next.
No, what came next was fire. Because as I sat there, staring at that untouched tea, my phone vibrated.
A message. From Liam. Finally. My stomach clenched, and I opened it immediately. Hey, Grandma. Something came up. Super busy.
Can you get an Uber to my place?
Keys under the mat. Sorry. No warmth. No apology beyond a single cheap word. No acknowledgement of the hours I sat waiting. I read it again. Then again. And with each read, something inside me hardened.
The ache turned into something sharper. Clarity, then certainty.
This wasn't misunderstanding.
This wasn't stress. This wasn't a momentary lapse.
This was disregard. Matthew watched me carefully.
Is that from him?
I nodded and turned the phone so he could see. He exhaled.
He didn't even offer to come back for you.
No, I said quietly.
He didn't.
And then another message appeared. Let me know when you get there. I might be out until late.
Just make yourself, comfortable.
Comfortable.
The laziness of the phrasing made something in me snap. I had given this boy my life, my years, my grief, my love.
And this was what I received. I straightened. Then I stood. Matthew rose too.
What do you want to do?
I'm going to see him, I said.
The words came out steady.
Cold. Final. Matthew nodded slowly.
Do you want company? I surprised myself by saying, yes.
And so we went. The Uber ride was quiet.
The city lights blurred past the windows, the hum of traffic filling the silence between Matthew and me. But inside me, the tension grew sharper, tighter, like an arrow being drawn back.
I rehearsed what I would say, then abandoned it, then tried again.
But by the time we reached Liam's apartment building, a sleek modern complex with glass doors and a buzzing entry, I knew talking wouldn't come first.
Seeing would. Understanding would.
Knowing the truth, face to face, would. Matthew stood a step behind me as I reached under the mat and pulled out the spare key Liam had mentioned. The fact that he'd left it there told me everything. He'd planned not to be home. He'd planned to let me fend for myself entirely. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was nice. Very nice. Too nice for someone who claimed to be struggling with deadlines and overwhelm.
But it didn't feel like him. Not the him I remembered. It felt curated. Impersonal. Cold. There were no photos on the walls. No mementos from home. Nothing of the life I'd shared with him. Just sleek furniture and a faint scent of expensive detergent. I walked slowly through the space, taking everything in. Every detail was another cut. Matthew stood near the doorway, giving me room. Then I heard it. Laughter. A voice. Another voice. From the balcony. My spine stiffened. I stepped toward the sliding glass door. And there he was.
Liam, my grandson, standing with a woman I'd never seen before. Young, stylish, leaning into him with ease. They were drinking wine, talking, laughing. Not stressed. Not overwhelmed. Not panicked. Just enjoying themselves. I froze. The woman spotted me first. Her smile faltered, then disappeared entirely as she nudged Liam's arm. Is that your grandma? He turned. And when his eyes landed on me, there it was again. Relief. Annoyance. Not love. Not warmth. Relief that he hadn't had to deal with me earlier. Annoyance that I was here now. Grandma, he said, voice tight. You weren't supposed to. I cut him off. What is this, Liam? He blinked. I told you I was busy. This doesn't look like busy, I snapped. My voice shook, but it didn't break. The woman stepped aside, suddenly uncomfortable. Liam rubbed the back of his neck, then muttered. Look, I didn't think you'd actually come today. I thought you'd postpone. Or forget. I don't know. He said it like I was the inconvenience. Like he was the victim of my reliability. Forget. I repeated. You invited me. He scoffed. I was being nice. The words hit harder than any slap. Being nice. As if my visit was charity. As if my existence required kindness to tolerate. Something inside me, something old, something tired, finally cracked open. Liam, I said quietly, I raised you. I stood by you when your world fell apart. And today, you left me in an airport like I was a package you didn't want delivered. He rolled his eyes. Grandma, don't make this dramatic. Dramatic? I said. You abandoned me. The woman on the balcony stepped away more definitively now, murmuring, I'll wait inside. Liam sighed like a man interrupted mid-task. Okay, look, I'm sorry. But I'm trying to build a life here. I'm busy. I can't just drop everything because you want to visit. I didn't want to visit, I said. You told me you wanted one. He didn't respond. Silence stretched. Tight. Heavy. Ugly. Matthew stepped forward then, not close, but visible, his presence firm. Liam's eyes darted to him, surprised. Who's that? He asked sharply. A stranger, I said, who treated me with more care today than you did. Liam flushed. Seriously? You brought someone into my... You left me alone, I interrupted. He didn't. Liam opened his mouth, then closed it. The embarrassment on his face flickered into irritation. So what now? You want me to grovel? No, I said. And here was the climax. The sharpest edge. The moment everything turned. I want you to understand what you lost today. He frowned, confused. Lost? What did I lose? Me, I said plainly. He blinked. Grandma, don't be ridiculous. But I stepped forward, looking directly into his eyes. Into the boy I'd carried through grief, into the young man who'd replaced gratitude with convenience. You treated me like a burden, I said. And that's not love. Not anymore. His jaw tightened. You're overreacting. No, I said softly. I'm waking up. The truth landed between us like a slab of stone. And it was him, not me, who stepped back. Because for the first time in years, I saw something in Liam's eyes that hadn't been there before. The realization that I wasn't bending. Not this time. Not anymore. And the woman behind him, standing awkwardly, watching, clearly saw it too. Liam's voice softened, uncertain. So what are you saying?
I'm saying, I answered, that love is action.
And today, you showed me yours is gone.
Silence. Complete. Final. I turned. Matthew opened the door for me without a word.
And as I walked out of that apartment, head high, breath steady, I felt something powerful surge through me.
Freedom. Painful, yes. But clean. Honest.
Undeniable.
The moment the door shut behind me, I knew.
This was my breaking point.
And my becoming.
The night air outside Liam's apartment felt different, cooler, sharper, almost cleansing. Like the first breath after leaving a room that had grown too tight. The hallway was quiet except for the hum of elevator cables and the distant echo of someone laughing several floors below. Ordinary sounds, but they felt strangely amplified, as if the world was reminding me it was still turning, even as something inside me had just irrevocably shifted. Matthew walked a step behind me, close enough that I could feel his presence but far enough to give me space.
He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't rush to fill the silence. I appreciated that more than he knew.
Talking would have shattered the fragile steadiness I was just beginning to feel. When we reached the elevators, I finally exhaled a long, trembling breath. My hands were cold, but the shaking had stopped. Something in me had settled, like dust after a storm. Not calm, exactly, but clarity. A sobered, grounded kind of clarity. The elevator arrived with a soft ding.
We stepped in.
The doors slid shut, and for a moment, I was grateful for the small, enclosed space. It felt like a pause, a brief cocoon where the world couldn't intrude.
Matthew waited until we started descending before speaking. His voice was quiet.
You handled that with more strength than most people ever could.
I let out a small, hollow laugh.
I don't feel strong.
You were honest, he said.
That's stronger than pretending everything is fine.
Pretending? Yes. I had done a lot of that. 4 years.
Filling in gaps with assumptions, cushioning his distance with excuses, patching over hurts with hope.
I didn't expect it to hurt this much, I whispered.
Even after everything today, seeing him look at me like that.
Matthew nodded.
It's hard to accept when someone you love shows you who they've become. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, but neither of us moved right away. I took a slow breath, then stepped out. My legs felt steadier now. Not completely, but enough. Outside, evening had begun to settle. Streetlights flickered on, casting long, warm streaks across the pavement. Cars passed lazily, the city beginning to wind down from its afternoon frenzy. We can get you back to the hotel, Matthew said. Get some rest. Tomorrow you can decide your next step. I considered that. Rest did sound necessary. My body was exhausted, my emotions scraped raw. But the idea of returning to a quiet room alone, with nothing but my thoughts, felt daunting.
I'd like to walk a bit, I said.
Just move. Matthew nodded, then gestured toward the sidewalk. Let's walk. We strolled in silence at first, letting the rhythm of footsteps soften the tension. A breeze brushed past, carrying the faint scent of ocean salt from somewhere in the distance. The city seemed gentler now, less intimidating.
Or maybe I was simply less fragile in this moment. After a few minutes, I spoke again.
I keep thinking about all the years I spent taking care of him.
All the nights I stayed up when he couldn't sleep.
All the school forms, the scraped knees, the broken hearts. I thought love would mean something permanent. Matthew walked quietly beside me, letting my words find their own pace. But love changes, I said. And sometimes it fades. I guess I didn't want to believe it could fade from him. Matthew exhaled softly. Family doesn't guarantee loyalty.
Or kindness. It should.
But it doesn't. Hearing it aloud stung, but it was true. We reached a bench overlooking a small park, trees shifting softly in the wind, lights glowing from nearby apartment windows.
I sat, and Matthew sat beside me.
I'm old enough to know people aren't perfect, I said. I made mistakes raising him.
I know I did.
But I never thought he'd stop seeing me as family. Matthew tilted his head slightly. You didn't lose him today.
You've been losing him slowly for years.
Today you just stopped denying it. The words were painful, yes.
But they didn't crush me.
They settled instead, an acknowledgement of something I already knew but hadn't dared name.
I folded my hands in my lap.
He thinks he hasn't lost anything.
He's wrong, Matthew said. He just doesn't realize it yet.
that made my chest tighten, not with hurt, but with a quiet grief. Not sharp grief, the kind that overwhelms,
but the kind that comes after clarity.
the grief of accepting reality.
I let my gaze drift toward the park. A mother pushed a stroller along a path.
A couple walked hand in hand, whispering something that made them laugh. A jogger passed by, breath steady in the cool air. Life, moving forward.
Indifferent. Steady.
After a long moment, I said, "Thank you for everything today."
You don't have to thank me, Matthew replied. I do, I said.
Most people would have walked past me.
He offered a sad smile.
I walked past someone who needed me once. I promised myself I wouldn't do it again.
There it was, the shadow I'd seen earlier. His pain. His connection to my story.
But I didn't press him, he wasn't offering the details, and I wouldn't pry. Instead, we sat in companionable silence until my body finally told me it was time to rest. The fatigue settled in my bones like sand sinking into place after a wave.
Let's get you back, Matthew said gently. I nodded. The walk back to the hotel was quiet. But inside me, something had shifted. I didn't feel abandoned anymore. Not in the same way. I felt released. Released from hoping. Released from waiting.
Released from bending myself around someone who no longer cherished the shape I had taken. Back in the lobby, the receptionist checked me in with a warm smile. Matthew waited nearby, making sure I was settled. When I finally held the key card to my room, he asked, "Will you be all right tonight?"
Yes, I said truthfully.
Do you need anything else?
I shook my head. You've done more for me than I can say.
He hesitated before offering one last small smile.
Take care of yourself.
And don't forget your own worth.
I nodded, feeling those words land deeply.
Then he left, disappearing through the glass doors and into the soft glow of the evening. I took the elevator up to my room. The moment I stepped inside, I set my suitcase down and sank onto the bed. The silence was loud, but no longer frightening. I rested my hands on my lap and stared at nothing for a while, letting the day replay in fragments.
Painful ones. Honest ones. Necessary ones.
And slowly, very slowly, I felt peace begin to take shape.
Not happiness.
Not forgiveness.
Not yet. But peace.
A quiet understanding that sometimes love means letting go, not holding on. I exhaled, long and steady.
Tomorrow, I would decide what to tell Liam. What to give him. What to take back.
But tonight, I simply allowed myself to be a person who had survived something heavy. And I knew, as I closed my eyes and let the exhaustion finally pull me under,
I was not broken. I was beginning again. Morning sunlight woke me before my alarm did.
A soft, steady light filtered through the sheer curtain of the hotel window, the kind of gentle brightness that invites you back into the world without jolting you. I lay there for a moment, listening to the faint hum of distant traffic, the rustle of housekeeping carts in the hallway, the peaceful rhythm of a city beginning another day. It took a few seconds for everything to come back.
The airport.
The waiting. Matthew. Liam.
The apartment.
The truth. It returned in fragments, sharp at first, then clearer, then gentler, as if my mind had decided overnight to soften the edges so I wouldn't wake up pierced by them. I sat up slowly, stretching my back, feeling the stiffness of a night spent processing more emotions than I'd felt in years.
I wasn't devastated this morning. Not hollow. Not shattered. Just aware. Aware of what had been lost. Aware of what had been found.
Aware of who I was, separate from who Liam used to be.
I moved to the window and opened the curtain fully.
The city looked ordinary. Cars moving steadily, a few early dog walkers, someone carrying a coffee tray. Ordinary scenes, but they reminded me that life doesn't pause for heartbreak, even the kind that arrives quietly, delivered not in one blow but in accumulated moments of neglect. Last night, after Matthew left, I had cried a little. Not the loud kind of crying, not the racking sobs that leave you gasping. Just a few tears, a few soft tremors, like letting air out of a balloon slowly.
Grief for what I thought I still had.
Grief for what I wanted to believe.
Grief for the version of Liam I was finally letting go of.
But now, in daylight, the grief felt cleaner, less tangled.
I wasn't drowning in it.
I was standing beside it, observing it, accepting it.
That acceptance came with a quiet truth.
I had spent years measuring my worth through the lens of one relationship.
And now it was time to see myself without that distortion.
I showered, dressed, and packed my things. I moved slowly, not out of sadness but out of intention.
There was no need to rush.
For the first time in a long time, I wasn't hurrying to meet someone else's expectations.
I was simply moving at the pace of my own choosing.
My phone sat on the nightstand, dark and silent.
No messages from Liam. No missed calls. Not even a half-hearted apology.
That told me everything I needed to know. I checked out of the hotel and ordered a ride to the airport, not to fly home yet, but because it felt like a place of transition, a space where people make choices, where they move forward or backward or sideways. I wanted to sit in that environment for a bit, to let my mind settle as I decided what came next. Inside the terminal, I found a quiet corner near window overlooking the tarmac. Planes moved slowly across the concrete, guided by orange-vested workers who communicated with hand signals. I admired the coordination, the clarity of their actions.
Everyone knew their role. Everyone was seen. I sat for a while, watching, breathing. Then my phone buzzed.
For a moment, foolishly, I let myself think it might be Liam.
It wasn't. It was Matthew.
A simple text, just checking in. How are you this morning? Warmth spread through me, unexpected, gentle. I typed back, I'm all right.
Thank you for yesterday. Truly.
He replied almost instantly, you were stronger than you realize. If you need anything today, I'm around.
I smiled. A real smile. Strangers aren't always strangers.
Sometimes, they are the reminder that kindness still exists in the world, even when the people you expect it from fail you. After a moment, I opened a new message, this one addressed to Liam.
I stared at the blank screen for a long time. What does one say to someone who has forgotten what you were to them?
What does one say to someone who loved you once, but no longer chooses to show it?
I didn't want to lash out. I didn't want to beg. I didn't want to guilt him. I wanted only truth. So I typed, Liam, I'm flying home today. I hope your life brings you joy, and I hope you grow into the man I once believed you would be. I love you, but I won't chase you anymore. Take care. I read it twice. The words were neither sharp nor soft. They were honest. Then I pressed send. No dramatic flourish.
No expectation of a response.
Just release.
And in that moment, I felt something inside me shift, like a knot that had been twisting for years had finally loosened.
I sat a little taller.
Breathed a little deeper.
Felt a little more like myself.
A voice announced boarding for a flight nearby, and I listened to the murmur of passengers gathering their things. It made me think about journeys, how some people travel with heavy suitcases, some with none at all. How some cling tightly to everything they carry, while others learn, slowly or suddenly, to set things down.
I had set something down today. Not Liam himself, he would always be part of my heart. But the version of him I'd been holding on to.
The boy who used to press his little cheek against my shoulder. The teenager who wrote me Mother's Day cards because he said I deserved them. The young man who promised he'd always come back. I let those memories settle where they belonged, in the past. I didn't erase them.
I didn't resent them. I simply allowed them to stop controlling me.
A few hours later, sitting at my departure gate, I felt ready. Not excited, not triumphant, just ready. Ready to return to my home, to my life, to myself. Ready to rebuild the quiet parts of my heart that had been neglected. Ready to nurture relationships that gave something back instead of draining me. Before the flight boarded, I typed one more message, to Matthew. Thank you again. You helped me more than you know. His response came moments later. You deserve people who choose you. I'm glad I could help you remember that.
I closed my phone with a soft exhale.
Then the gate agent called my boarding group. As I walked down the jet bridge, I felt a calm sense of closure, not because everything was fixed, but because I had chosen to move forward, to protect my heart, to honor my own worth.
Not all stories end with reconciliation.
Not all wounds heal the way we hope. But sometimes the most important healing comes from recognizing who stayed, who left, and who showed up when you needed them most.
That alone can change a life. So here is my moral, the truth I learned in the hardest, gentlest way.
Love should never require you to shrink, to beg, or to wait on the curb for someone who doesn't see your worth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away and believe you deserve better. And now, to you, the one listening to my story.
Did you like my story?
Please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of mine travels.
Distance doesn't define love. Actions do.